You are listening to the e-flux podcast.
In today's episode, Hallie Ayers and Tamara Hassanova speak to Saodat Ismailova following a conversation and discussion at e-flux titled To Share a Dream with the River. The event featured 3 films. You can find more information on each in the show notes. Saodat's 2-channel video, Two Horizons, is also currently on view at the Shanghai Biennale.
Hello, it's Friday, December 8th, and we're recording this episode the day after the screening of your 3 works at the e-flux screening room. And since some listeners may be unfamiliar, the screening showcased 3 works. It opened with The Haunted, followed by Stains of Oxus, and concluded with Chillpiq. And I would like to delve kind of deep back into The Haunted for a brief moment as a way to sort of begin this conversation between the 3 of us. During the discussion part, I mentioned that one of the reasons I wanted The Haunted to start the program was quite personal, since it was the first film of yours that I ever watched. And it helped to feel sort of this absence that I had long felt growing up, despite my frequent visits to see my father's family in Uzbekistan. And, during our conversations, I shared an anecdote with you and the audience. So perhaps it would be nice to briefly revisit this anecdote for the listeners here. Back when I was about 12 years old, my father and I went to visit his family in Amu Darya. And a man who was invited to cook for a wedding celebration ended up sharing a tale with me that Uzbekistan used to be this place of tigers. Unfortunately, they disappeared during the late 60s since they were actively hunted down. And something that I didn't mention during the screening is that he might have been a hunter himself, actually, or said that he had known a few in his lifetime. And for the next decade, I had to sort of bury my curiosity for the story for many years, and with that, a sense of grief that I felt when learning about the story. Watching the film made me also, realize that what started from a very personal place extended into a larger question of how the stories are carried and remembered, as well as who they serve at large. So by starting the program with The Haunted, it became a vital way to establish a historical backdrop, especially through its usage of archival footage of the early Central Asian filmmaking, and shedding the light on how the history of Central Asia ended up shaped and manipulated by the many ideological shifts that affected the course and remembrance of the stories more broadly. However, I want to point out that what really distinguishes it from other films of yours is the very direct evocation and the format of an open letter, sort of this monologue, the knowledge yet at the same time refusal to accept that your appeal won't be returned. So I wonder if you could talk about that and the process of writing or addressing a subject that may never answer you back, in a sense. And if you have any sort of follow-up thoughts.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm just thinking about whether there is a response. I think so, because I believe that any type of regeneration or reconstruction, revitalization, it needs this state of what you said, grieving, realization of loss. And it doesn't mean that this healing or return will be in the same shape as what you are grieving for. So it's about that. When I decided to make the film, as I spoke yesterday after the screening, by reading the interviews of people and their representation of the image and the presence of the animal that doesn't exist in the reality, what we think, but it does exist, and it's became way more important and present in kind of an illusion. But when they speak about it, you really lose the sense of where the illusion and where the reality is. This was quite fascinating. So by reading and rereading and by re-listening to these interviews and seeing how this animal is important. Of course, you cannot have this access through my film when you listen them speaking and you experience their emotional, the way they speak, the way their voice goes, right? it's a totally different experience. It's way more pure. It's not reworked by mediator, which is me in this case with the haunted, with the film. So it was strange for me first that I grew up in a city that we kind of knew that there were tigers, but it was so far, like and you don't know, you don't pay attention. So it's more like this blindness that we grew up within the city because we were taken by other things by not paying attention to these lost presences, let's say, right? So after collecting the interviews and speaking with people, for me it was strange that, or it became evident and necessary to make this letter of farewell, like to mourn an animal, and I believe it deserves. And so that was the reason I made this film. And again, to say, when you think about grief or mourning, it's a very important ritual that we have because, first of all, is to face an emptiness that is created unexpectedly, and how you deal with that emptiness. And grieving, it's a sacred ritual. So by grieving through this film, for me, it was it became by making the film and writing the text, a search of what is lost, but again, is not to find exactly what is lost, but how to regenerate and to fill that empty space.
I really appreciate what you say about this regenerative force that you're talking about, and I wonder if actually you might kind of see the sense of joy that might come out of that space in the future, following all of this experience that you had with this film.
Yes, of course. I mean, to regenerate, or when we say about regeneration or healing, we mean life, right? And life is full. It has everything. It has all the qualities. So it means all types of experiences when we speak about of regeneration and filling up the space that is lost or became empty. Yeah.
So speaking on this thread of aspects of nature that have been lost, or grieving for these aspects of nature, I wanted to ask a bit about in the realm of the elements, so these elemental forces of nature, because in at least the films we saw in the screening, you tend to train your camera on flows of water, and these currents highlight the flow of the Amu Darya river, but also this flux on kind of a micro and macroscopic level, because the water we see rushing by on the screen, there's also an undercurrent, no pun intended, on a macro level, which is that the breadth of these streams is drastically decreasing. So I wonder if you could speak a bit about your impulse to show this water typically in contrast to solid earth. So, for example, in Strains of Oxus, we see images of water bisected by stones or racing past stable riverbanks or shores. So yeah, I wonder if you could just speak about this kind of visual contrast between these elements of earth and water and how that might contribute to the larger ecological narratives that are at play, for instance, in Stains of Oxus, but also throughout your work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it's, I was yesterday questioning myself on what you are saying now, because by putting these three works together, in the three works, I'm using this very simple technique of overimposure, right? Surimpression, how you say, double exposure in the photography, right? But I don't do it double, I do it like many, many layers that are exposed over each other. And what I do it with water and I do it with humans. I never thought about it. Like yesterday I was like, well, this is interesting. And then by the end of the Chillpiq, I thought, I guess it's about this momentum of life, no, like a fluidity of life, something that passes by and it's present, non-present, and the time, right? So what is to be present and what is to be in the moment. Of course, you can speak about it on a human body because it has a certain type of way to be calculated, while the body of water is not what you calculate, right? It's uncalculated. But then I think it's related to time. I don't yet have the answer, but what I sensed yesterday, it was related to time, because there is kind of visually fixed bodies, and then there is more fluid bodies. Of course, by fluidity, it's more easy to again measure it, right? And speaking about like environment and maybe the situation in the region, for example, now we are working with this research group in Central Asia that I have initiated called Taming Water and Womanhood, because also the extinction of the Turan tiger, it's related not only to the hunting, but also mainly to the mismanagement of the rivers, and that they lost the place of inhabitants. So the reeds were gone and the rivers were rearranged. There were no more prey for the animal. This was also a huge important factor of losing the Turan tiger. But of course it was hunted, but because before the Soviet period it was not hunted. So there is kind of a parallel between female and water, which of course we know it from philosophers and also like looking at works of art. There is always this parallel between a woman, fertility, and water. Yes, I think that it is all interconnected, because in the case of Uzbekistan, when the rivers were rearranged in parallel, the women were emancipated, like they were brought into a labor. So they had to increase the labor in Uzbekistan for the cotton cultivation and other type of work. So I always see this parallel between water and women in Uzbekistan especially. So if we speak about ecology, I think that it's also connected. You cannot split it from each other. But of course, then we also can think more in direct understanding of river mismanagement, land mismanagement, which is kind of catastrophic today. Yeah, but I guess also water is something sacred for us because we don't have much water. We are the second landlocked country in the world. After there is Liechtenstein also in Europe. So we are two landlocked countries in the world, double landlocked, not once but double. So we have this sacred relation to water. So maybe what you are saying about the presence of water and its contrast with solid bodies also related to this sacredcy that we are transmitted to be very careful about the water sources.
Yeah, I want to bring in also one more element, because it's invisible, but it's entirely tangible in the films, and that's wind and how it engages with humans, but also human-made structures. So in the films we saw, for example, in Chillpiq and The Haunted, a lot of the early shots are dominated by these flags or people's clothes billowing and very powerful currents of wind, so much so that the wind feels tangible. But it's like a wind that blows with a force that underscores not like a violence of natural elements, but rather this sort of awe-inspiring aspect. And I think it's a very particular element to focus on, since arguably its greatest aesthetic feature is also in its sonic range. So wind can range from nearly silent to howling. And despite the fact that it has no visible, tangible form, somehow it seems to play a role in your films that's almost akin to like a protagonist in the shots where it's featured. And then, what you were speaking about, how you superimpose or double exposure with people in these shots, it's almost as if the people, they appear translucid against the backgrounds, but as if they're dissipating into this plane of wind. So I wonder if you could speak a bit about, your interest in capturing on camera this invisible force within this realm of the elements, and also, its aesthetic qualities as much as its sonic qualities.
Well, the wind is, when you are in the steppe, and the Karakalpakstan, especially Chillpiq, is the beginning of the steppe. And I think that I got connected to that place also. It was in 2014. I have been making how can I put it right? Well, let's say a field research around the Kırkız, the 40 girls, which is an oral story that became some kind of the work like Chillpiq in 4 years. I end up on that structure because, well, I never knew about it, about this Tower of Silence. We were just driving with the driver. It was very early, like 5 in the morning. And I said, well, I really would like to see what it is. So he drove me there and there was no one. And it was amazing. I think it was one of the most powerful experiences I ever had, because when you climb over it, and if you look at the west, I don't know why it's actually always I look at the west, because you can look all the directions, no? Looking at the west, so you have a steppe on your right hand and you have irrigated lands on your left hand. So you have like totally green lands, irrigation, water, river on your left hand. And on your right hand, it's like dry, flat, endless landscape. So it's a huge contrast of this dual way of living, which is also a sedentary and nomadic, horizontal and vertical, like the way people think, and also they relate to the outside world, which is very contrasted. And but another thing which was very unexpected for me is that I sense that the wind just carried out dust from my skin. And the dust was all the cultural background that I am aware of. It took it away, but it was like in a moment, in a second. It was finished, it was gone. And I have realized that there is a space which is beyond what I am aware of, what I know, And this is something I speak, I come from a religious, spiritual background, from Turkestan. So this disappeared in a second, it was just finished. And again, yes, it was the wind. And later I did a project in Kazakhstan where I was working only in the steppe, and we have this feeling that steppe has nothing, right? It's an empty space. It's actually not at all empty space. It's full of life. Is just how you perceive it and how you are open to see this fullness. And of course, the wind plays a big role, and the wind, of course, it becomes in its full, and it becomes so present and the main force when you are in the steppe. Related to the sonic, this is, I'm quite sure that it started there. I think it's related to a gut of an animal and a wind, the creation of string instrument. And because when you speak with the traditional musicians, like a couple of them told me this legend about an animal that died and that the gut gets stretched, it dries, and then it sounds. You take any type of string instrument to the steppe and you hold it and it will sing. It can be a metallic string, it can be a gut string, so... And you don't need to play and manipulate. It will sing, and it will not be on one tonality. It will give all types of possible sounds because of the density of the wind, also the angle of the wind as it comes. So this is what I can say about the wind. And of course, when we speak about the wind in the film, how do you communicate it? And I think that's the reason I have a lot of flags. I don't like the flags when they come to the question of the national identification. I think, well, not in that sense, but the textile, like ribbons, yeah.
This allows me to pivot into my next question, which is sort of how I was reflecting on Hallie's comment about the expansive sonic range in your work and its capacity to underline natural elements, almost bringing them to the fore and making them equal to other subjects, whether human or non-human. And, it reminded me of a moment during the Q&A yesterday when someone in the audience asked you about your approach to working on soundtracks for your films. And you sort of responded by saying how recently you've been looking for silence, but silence that is not defined by the absence of sound. And I wanted to ask you to kind of potentially elaborate on that a little bit more.
Well, I think that, I see it more transparent, right? The silence. And I feel like a bit resting on the sound. as I said yesterday, it's probably one of the most inspiring and enriching collaborations within my practice is to work with the composers. The formulas were always very different. With some of them, I worked from the first day, even before writing. With the others, I invited at the very last stage when the film is already edited, so they just come and contribute. So the collaborations were very different. But then in the editing, I hear first, and then I use images. And probably when you do it a certain period of your life, there is a moment where you create a formula and understanding of a logic of your work or how I move it. And when that firm formula becomes clear, it becomes less interesting because there is no mystery or a magic that can happen without out of your will or a capacity of a control. And this is very important for me in the editing. But I start understanding. So the formula became clear and it's related to the sound. So that's where I said, well, I need a bit of to rethink how I work with the sound and challenge myself on that level. But this is not only kind of a decision through understanding the situation, but also by seeing films, my films recently, I have plenty of questions related to the way I use the sound because sometimes it's quite overwhelming. Yes, I believe in that. But like what we have seen yesterday, the most recent was 2018, Chillpiq. So it's already like 6 years ago. And I guess it's like a natural way of trying and also feeling. But I start appreciating more, manipulating less with the sound.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your work that's currently in the Shanghai Biennial, which is Two Horizons from 2017. Maybe I'll give a brief introduction to the film. So this comes from the wall text in Shanghai. Two Horizons combines a prophecy carried down from in the ancient Turkic oral histories of Korkut with the more recent history of a space launch facility. The tomb of Korkut, the storyteller and seer, who is the central hero of the epic, lies in the south of Kazakhstan near the Baikonur Cosmodrome. In the local culture, the belief persists that a person will one day come to defeat gravity and achieve eternal life. So that's the film. And I wanted to bring it up because what you've spoken about previously in regards to, and at the Q&A last night as well, in regards to understanding the river, the Amu Darya River, as a limit through which certain people cannot or could not pass. And in these cases, there still remains this curiosity that's oriented toward that which is beyond this limit of the water. And in Two Horizons, of course, this limit becomes vertical as well. So I'm wondering, just throughout your work, if you could talk a bit about how you theorize these limits or these spaces of thresholds or horizons. And also, just coming back to what Tamara was just talking about in terms of the sound design, I'm curious if you see sound as a means of passing through these limits, since it has this capacity to transcend physical or imposed barriers.
Well, just to make it more I need to go out from the previous question, I guess, related to the sound. Speaking or thinking about the Two Horizons, it's probably where I feel the closest to the sound experience. And when I was thinking about this gravity, losing of gravity, search for immortality, which is like in the main search of the Korkut of this character from the myth. It's a mythical character. So I said, well, probably since he was told he hears the voice, I mean, it's not in the film, but in the story, he hears the voice that the only way to beat the death is through the sound. And so he creates the musical instrument, which is in this story said to be the first musical instrument of humanity. It's called qobus, and the instrument exists today. It's kind of archaic form of violin, and the instrument before the establishment of Soviet Union was used for the healing sessions. It was not used as a melodical instrument. It's a healing instrument. But it lost its healing meaning during the Soviet time because it was introduced to orchestras and it was rearranged so it can play with other instruments as a normal musical instrument. So he creates that instrument. And all the myth is about him looking for immortality, but he keeps on facing death everywhere, wherever he goes. And he goes like to the seas, to deserts, to the very cold parts of the world and the mountains and so on. It's a beautiful story, but he keeps on facing the death and then like the death, the end, right? The limit, because the death also can be seen as a limit in between what we understand and what we are aware of and what we are not aware of. Mainly is that, right? And so he creates this musical instrument, and the moment he how you say it in English? Выводит первый звук. Yeah, like he pulls out the first sound, let's say, no? The first sound that appears in the instrument is where he loses the gravity. And then he floats over the Darya river and he stays floating over it. So he achieves immortality by losing the gravity. And this happens thanks to the sound. So it's an answer to your question when you say if the sound is transcendent and has a capacity of going beyond the limits and the borders. I guess yes, because there is a very ancient story for that. These stories are put together probably by thousands of people, by their wisdom and experience that they lived to bring it to a shape that arrived today. So even thinking about this story, yes, sound has this incredible capacity. And when I think about image and the sound, I think that image is limiting. It's more limiting than the sound because it already makes it very clear by bringing a definition, whether you are filming a figure or a landscape or an animal, a factory or a city, so it's already defined. And as soon as there is a defined message, then it's hard to go backwards to bring an audience to a space which is more open. So, of course, the sound is way more transcendent. It goes into a human senses in more direct and transparent way, and it allows to move within that emotion depending on experience of everybody. So definitely the sound, I see it as a space that offers more liberty for the experience. But then going back to the sound score of the Two Horizons, what I was saying is that I said, well, if the sound is what brings us to immortality and we can hear from until 20,000 from 20 hertz, well, but this is like for the animals, right? But we did it in between 60 hertz and 16,000 hertz, but it's very difficult. You should have excellent ears. But all the sound score is built around that. So we took this limit of what our ears are capable to hear. Like bats, they hear way higher frequencies, the elephants way lower frequencies that we cannot hear. So we limit it on the human limits. And so, for example, when in the last part I filmed a rocket going to the space, which happened like 21 of April. We were there in 2017. It was a joint venture of Russia and the States. But for the sound, in fact, the low frequencies, they keep on going lower, and then the high frequencies, they keep on going higher. But the limit is between 16,000 and 60. So that was kind of a way of the sound is physical experience. It's not also just abstract. It's purely physical experience, and that's how I was approaching the sound in Two Horizons, and I think that that's the way I would like to work. So the sound score and thinking about the sound and music comes from an idea that comes from the concept of the subject that the film proposes, and then when you find what the idea, so then you can expand it. Because I think what is important that the music, it's not an instrument where helps you to accentuate certain type of emotions, but it should be really thought conceptually. And then I think that if that is found, it can be quite an interesting adventure. Yeah. I don't know if I responded to limits, but I think I did. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about, in Two Horizons, the setting is this cosmodrome. And then, for example, in Chillpiq, the setting is this Tower of Silence. But these locations, they kind of exist without context. So I just wonder, you might speak a bit about letting the settings sort of exist as they are in the films. And presenting the settings as they appear rather than sort of as objects, maybe. I don't know how to phrase this, but
I think what you mean, Hallie, is that you're probably talking to the fact that these places, when you see the films and sort of without a specific context, you see them without signifiers of where these places are, so they can be kind of like from anywhere, and that really expands the breadth of these films, because then they really traverse through different contexts and borders, and that's where it becomes like this cosmological relationship. Yeah, but
so she responded. You have an answer? No. No, I think it's a very good response. Yeah.
Okay.
This is interesting. I'm like trying to think, because I have other questions that come to mind, but I was, something that we didn't get to talk about during the discussion, which I felt very sad about during our screening. We kind of left Chillpiq a little bit behind and didn't talk about the relationship between Chillpiq and the haunted. And specifically, I think I mentioned a little bit before the screening that the reason why I placed the haunted in also in the beginning and then Chillpiq in later, at the end of the screening, was this relationship between the last scene in the haunted and very much this focus on the archeological side in Chillpiq. And what I also noticed is that in the haunted, you have this archeological site and you are presented with these three women who appear to be circling around in this almost about to commit ritual, but you actually don't really see that happening compared versus something that is much more extended in Chillpiq. And there is this interesting dichotomy between, first of all, I guess the setting, the rain. There is you see this really subtle drops of rain in the frame, which I also had to see it on a large screen to even be able to understand why in the corners the screen is blurry. And it made me think about the setting, this emotional setting that you have in the haunted on that site, where it's full of this sadness and sort of, I guess, referring to the fact of death and dying, versus something like in Chillpiq where the site becomes an element of emergence of life. So there's this duality between death and life. And I wonder if you could kind of talk about that maybe a little bit, and how perhaps it was also important for you to revisit this site after working on the haunted, and maybe also showing it in a different light for you. Although the site does always show this continuation, I guess, of death and dying, because it was, as you said, a very important site for Zoroastrian beliefs, and with also the legend of Kirkiz and all of that.
It's actually sometimes interesting that I notice that there are some places that I keep on going back in my films, but not consciously, in a sense that I never think of like Chillpiq happened. I didn't commit making this film. Actually, I was in Oxus waiting for a permission to film another production, which was way bigger. But then we were sitting there like during 1 week, and it's all very practical. Your budget is running because you have all your crew and you are just sitting and waiting for a permission. So I was like, well, since we are here, what can we do, So we do something. And Chillpiq is so isolated, so nobody would ever come and ask you, what are you doing? Where is your permission? And I said, well, let's just put these 40 girls. And I had amazing line producer. She organized it very fast and get some snacks. And we go there and we do something. I didn't know what I'm going to do. I think that also yesterday I was questioning myself about the end of the film when there is like, it's totally computer generated animation with the sun. And I was like, but why did I do it? What is it doing here? And in fact, it is related because I did it so easy, this film. I went there without knowing what I'm doing because I was doing something bigger and it was just a way to do, like not to sit and not to be frustrated. So it was done in half a day. And then I guess it's like a way to force yourself to find the meaning in what you are doing. So it's really my kind of a conversation with myself. But the films can be done also in a very smooth way. It depends on how you conceptualize it, and it can be conceptualized later. Like it happened with Chillpiq sometimes, because when they arrived, I was like, okay, well, there were very simple directions, what we're doing there, as I explained yesterday. So to speak about so Chillpiq, it's never was a space that I said I'm dedicating a work to it. Never, ever in my life. It just came like first time, as I said, I end up there because I was driving back and forth and there was something in the middle of the landscape. When I was making The Haunted, I also went there because it was on the way. I was like, I cannot just pass by. But since I always carry my camera with me, I just put the camera there and there were these women out of nowhere that came. So drops of rain, it can be considered as a footage that you don't use because I'm a little bit demanding from the image and composition. But here I was totally convinced that this is the right thing I'm doing, of using this footage, because it really drags you from this space of illusion and creation to the pure reality, without me plotting or like looking for a perfect composition, but like let it happen as it happens. So never Chillpiq was a place that I would think like I'm going there to do a film, but it's beautiful that it keeps on coming back, and it comes back. Yesterday it came back how many times? 2 times. It's also in Kyrgyz 3 times in my work. But when you edit, of course, then you have to think, right? It's not like, oh, I'm here, maybe I film and maybe something happens. It's, yes, the cemeteries, all types of tombs. We have a very big cult of ancestors in Central Asia. This is what makes us different, for example, from Islam, which is on the southern bank of Amu Darya river. They don't have such a huge ancestral presence as we do. That makes us closer to Asia, like to China, where the ancestral presence is very big. This is our particularity. And I think that the importance of dreams, why is so in Central Asia, because this is for us, the core is that we connect to ancestors through the dreams. It's the tunnel. And so the cemeteries have always engravements of certain saints with it's there. Like, for example, the first image of The Haunted with a white flag, and there is a white, it's a Zoroastrian site. I hope it's still there. And so it came back because of this presence of cemetery for us, connecting to the ancestors, and also there is a shot of a Zoroastrian necropolis that I filmed, which looks like a city. It's called Mizdakhana. I spoke there with the keeper of the cemetery, and he says that every Thursday the tiger comes back. When they speak, it's like they're totally conceived of what they're saying. It's not like, like we think. No, it comes back. It's there every Thursday. And I was like, but how do you know it's here? And he said such a beautiful sentence. He said, the sound disappears. I was like, of what? He says, of everything. Like wind, dogs, night, it all gets like vacuumed. And we know that the tiger has arrived. And then he was like, and we see the scratches, we see his traces of paws, so there is the presence of the animal, apparently, that for them that exists. So, yeah, speaking about cemeteries, that's why there are a lot of cemeteries used in the haunted, and the Chillpiq is one of cemetery.
First of all, your description of this story, I guess, about the tiger coming to the cemetery site is, I don't know, there is some bodily response that I cannot describe when you say the scratching and all of that. But I also, this maybe pivots in a slightly different direction, my question, but yesterday, I was also thinking about when you were talking about collecting the dreams and the sense of trust that you had to build with your subject, going and talking to them, because obviously they don't share these dreams with humans. They share it with water. They share it with more than human forms of living. And that made me think about also the fact that, you act as a collector of oral histories and stories, and then you try to project them on screen. So I wonder if there are any, perhaps sometimes minor dissatisfactions or hesitations on how you do it. Okay, because then they become these fixed state forms, and maybe sometimes it's frustrating to see that while you know that oral histories, they always continue to transform and change, and that's the sometimes magic of them, right? They traverse through time because they're never the same, while the film kind of puts you in that constraint.
Well, I grew up on these stories, and I think why I care so much about this transmission, it's this space will always, at least for me, be a saving ground, in any moment of a crisis, emotional crisis. It's a space where I feel extremely safe, and it brings a stability, So speaking about my personal experience, and I do these works related to this space that I find through speaking to people, I guess because there is an attraction and there is a safe space there, which is related to, again, an experience of that was transmitted from generation to generation, it's endless. Yes, by making a film, it fixes it. But this is what I can do, This is what I have learned. Maybe if I would be telling these stories, they're out of time, even the kids today will not be attracted to that. It's not that I have ever thought about it, but maybe that's what I would be doing, at least within my family. But when we bring it on the screen, we make it more accessible to, and we make it more kind of contemporary, So people come to watch it because it is a film, because it's art film, It's not defined by a certain type of grammar, like film grammar. So there is an attraction of a thought and a development of a moving image, but using that, what you do is that you try to transmit these stories and make them more accessible to people. And then, of course, it depends on where they take it, but it's not about transmitting the exact story, but it's maybe making them a bit more sensitive to remember, and to, at least if they remember something, it's already amazing, I think. It's about that. But of course, there is this essay of Walter Benjamin called The Storyteller. Mm-hmm. It's about telling stories, and how the stories die. He speaks there about the moment when the print appeared, right? Already by printing it, it's fixed. So I think about it, and I also thought, it would be interesting for me have non-closed editings, that when you edit live, because there is another part that always makes me feel excited, and the DJ sets, I really think that these are shamanic sessions of contemporary day, when people can experience possible spaces that you cannot do when we are in these controlled spaces in the society. So yes, the moving image can be done live as well, and maybe this is, again, it's not an answer, but it can be done as an experiment to understand whether it is possible to make it live that way, where you replay or re-edit live each time depending on space and how you feel the audience. So because the storytelling is about improvisation, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe that's a good point to finish. Storytelling as improvisation. Thank you so much for joining us again with Hallie. Do you want to say?
No, thank you. It's been a real pleasure speaking, and thank you for showing your films as well.
Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, it was a great pleasure. Thank you.
To conclude this episode, please enjoy an excerpt from a composition by US-born, Oslo-based artist Camille Normant, used in Saodat's film, The Haunted. Enjoy.